Good morning. My name is Karina Rodriguez. I just graduated with a bachelor's in French from the University of Arizona. And this summer I'm in the higher education department, specifically medical education. My project is to study the disconnect between the requirements for medical school admission and the requirements for success in the medical profession. Just real quick, despite overwhelming evidence that supports the importance of social cognitive variables and diversity in medical school, there is an over-reliance on traditional metrics, meaning MCAT GPA scores, from the admissions committee. So the goal of this paper is to study that disconnect between what it means to be a good doctor and a good student. And the question is specifically, what does the admissions committee value when they're reviewing applicants, and whether this process is congruent with the evidence that supports the importance of those social cognitive variables. Okay, methodology. So let me just start by explaining that there's a partnership between the College of Medicine and the College of Education. And at the College of Education, the group is called AMERI. It's the American Medical Education Research Institute. And that's actually the team I'm on this summer. It consists of my mentor, a PhD student, a PhD candidate, and myself. So before I even got there, that team actually conducted interviews of the admissions committee of this past year. So the 2012-2013 cohort. Because they were doing research with human subjects, they had to get IRB approval, and they were approved, right? I wouldn't be presenting this right now. So the design of the interview questions, so it was a collaboration between the research team and the admissions office, the administration. So they really wanted to see, probe the committee's views on their review process. So looking at, how did they evaluate those social cognitive variables, and then the usefulness of data points, meaning how did they use a personal statement, were the essays useful, the multiple mini interviews, kind of what was important about that. For a list of complete interview questions, please see my Appendix A in my paper. So the interviews the participants consented to being audio recorded, and the interviews were also transcribed verbatim. We did a qualitative analysis of these transcriptions, and the importance of qualitative analysis is that you are really able to get in-depth analysis of the answers. So our process, pretty much there was 11 interviews of the members of the admissions committee, and we had 11, but we only chose 3 to individually read and code. So although all of us read the same 3 interviews, identified themes that we saw were important. Then we got together, had a meeting, and just discussed it. Okay, what themes did you see? Was there any trends? Were there patterns? And we had a whiteboard. We threw all the themes kind of on the board, and then after that, we really came up with codes, which are kind of like concepts that we used that were important throughout the 3 interviews. Then after we did standardize these codes, we went back, we revisited the same 3 interviews, and we recoded them again with the standardization of the codes that we had. And then we met one more time and literally went through page by page of the transcripts and said, okay, I coded this, this way, did you do the same? And it was just a discussion to make sure we were all on the same page. So after this, I went ahead and read and coded 2 more interviews, so I had a total of 5 interviews for this project. Preliminary findings. So they suggest that there's actually no holistic review going on right now in the admissions office. And just evidence that points to that is that the committee members were confused about they're provided with a list of 11 attributes, both consisting of cognitive and non-cognitive variables, but they didn't really know what some of them meant. It was hard to capture some of them. There's just an inconsistency of value. Some place more weight on, cultural competency instead of maybe distance traveled. And there's another thing too, is that there's not really a rubric. So it's hard to standardize those different attributes to end up, having any use for the admissions committee. And what's more is that the attribute scores were not even factored into the review process, because they have this other process that's called the Gestalt score, which is kind of a gut feeling score. So the attribute scores weren't even factored into that in the first place. Limitations. So the results are limited to the Millennium University College of Medicine and Millennium. So I was not allowed to use the University of Arizona, even though I've been doing that. So I'll have to go back and give the U of A a pseudonym, and we'll see, but I'll decide on Millennium or not. But anyway, so the results are limited to this university, and they can't really be, adapted to other universities, but it will still give you kind of an idea of holistic review and how it's being effective or not. And like I said, so there was 11 interviews that were available, but only 5 out of them were coded for this project. So discussions, in my discussion section, I'll revisit the importance of holistic review, diversity, social cognitive variables, and I'll address the need for a standardization of those attributes, of those criteria. I need for a rubric so that everybody can just have that standard way of evaluating applicants. There's also a need for accountability, which is part of this project, right? It's really seeing what are they using and seeing how it can be improved. And also it's important to note that, so the first applications are already in. The application cycle opened in June. So they're starting to get applications in, they're gonna be starting to do interviews. So, change for this next year is probably not likely, but maybe in the next year or two that this can really kind of get standardized so it can be useful. These are my acknowledgements. Any questions? Or feedback?
Okay, because what I would recommend is at the beginning, it's qualitative, so you really start with your setting and your participants.
Okay.
So you really should, if it's Millennial College of Medicine, that's where you should
stay
start.
that, okay.
So really name your setting.
Okay.
This is where I'm working a large, allopathic College of Medicine in the Southwest. Something like that, and then I would get into your participants. So
Okay,
who are
right away.
Actually, the committee members. It tends to be PhD and MD faculty at the university. Is there any diversity? Are they all like middle-aged white guys?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Something along those lines, that's important as well.
Okay.
And then something about the procedure, like how do they actually go through an admissions process? Because you're really breaking down if there's a holistic review, but we don't know what the process is. So if it's not a holistic review, you need to tell us what the review is.
Also, like what they're
And
doing
then
instead.
construct it,
Okay.
If you start that way, that would be good.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's my.
Great.
Okay, sure.